Hello everyone, my name is JoshJrumJrastic and welcome to another MrBallen video. Today's video is top 3 photos with disturbing backstories part 16. We haven't seen them for a while and I decided to watch them today. Anyways, today's video is 16 minutes long. I hope you have your water with you. I do, mine's over there. I always put it over there, I don't know why, but I just do. Anyways, as always guys, I hope you enjoy this kind of content. If you do, consider leaving a like on the video. It'd be much appreciated. If you're new here, hi, I'm Josh, and this is what I do. I react to videos, and sometimes I play video games. So if you enjoy that kind of content, consider subscribing and sharing my videos with friends so that I may grow and we can all watch and play some awesome videos and video games together. And if you have any suggestions of any videos you'd like me to watch, go down in my comments below, leave me the link or title to the video, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Anyways, on with the video.
Today, I'll be sharing 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I will share the photo that is famously associated with them. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times.
I've got to the point where I just I know what you're gonna say.
Please provide the pinata for the like button's birthday party, and ensure it is filled exclusively with old cigarette butts.
Okay.
Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Alright, let's get into today's stories.
Sounds awesome. Let's do it. Boom, ba-da-dum, 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 ba-da-dum. It's a bit chilly in my room.
Colette Moreno was born on June 9th, 1988 in San Diego, California. She moved to Missouri, but most of her family stayed behind in San Diego, and so the way she stayed in touch with them was by sharing funny videos and photos online. In 2008, when Colette was 21 years old, she had her son named Braden. But within a year, her relationship with Braden's father fell apart, and suddenly Colette needed to pick up all these extra shifts at the doctor's office where she worked in order to make ends meet. Her Facebook post told the story of a happy single mother working very hard to give her son the best life she possibly could. But on the inside, she wasn't that happy. She wished she could spend more time at home with her son, and she secretly hoped she might fall in love again. Fast forward to 2010, and both of those things would come true when Colette met Jesse Arcabasso at a party, and they hit it off right away and they began dating. He was 25, she was 23, and the young couple was goofy and carefree. One year for Halloween, they dressed up as Jack and Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas, and they regularly sent each other Snapchat photos of the weirdest faces they could make. After 3 years together, Jesse and Colette stopped by a mall caricature artist, and when the artist was done and showed the picture to the couple, Colette gasped. It was a picture of a cartoonish Jesse down on one knee, holding out a diamond ring with the words, "Will you marry me?" over the top. Colette, of course, said yes, and they set the date for July 26, 2014, and decided to marry in Jamaica. Over the course of the next year, Colette's Facebook feed would fill with silly engagement photos and shots of the family-to-be. One picture showed Braden jumping on the couple's backs in their living room, another showed Jesse lifting Braden up so he could put the star at the top of the Christmas tree, and still another showed Colette leaping into Jesse's arms in a big field. A month before the wedding, on June 20th, 2014, Colette was on her way to her own bachelorette party when she started choking. The large truck that was driving in front of her and her best friend Ashley Theobald, who was driving, was spewing these thick black fumes, and it was aggravating Colette's asthma. But the Missouri highway they were on was a single lane with double yellow lines in the middle, so Ashley could not pass around the truck. And so at first, Ashley began to just slow down to try to stop the fumes from getting in the car, but the truck was going impossibly slow and the fumes were still getting in. And so with Colette really struggling to breathe, Ashley craned her neck around to the left to try to look beyond the truck into oncoming traffic to see if any cars were coming, and the coast looked clear, so Ashley tilted the wheel and drove into oncoming traffic and sped up to try to pass the truck. But before she could complete the pass, another car came over a slight hill that she had not seen. Ashley swerved to get out of the way, but it was too late, and the car crashed into the passenger side door right where Colette was sitting. Ashley, who was not only Colette's best friend, but also her maid of honor, sustained only minor injuries from the crash. Also, the driver of the other car that came over the hill was not seriously injured. As soon as the dust had settled and both vehicles had come to a stop, Ashley immediately looked over at Colette and was relieved that she did not look badly hurt. She asked her if she was okay, and Colette, who looked very shocked, turned to her and just nodded her head. She wasn't speaking, but she seemed okay. So when Ashley was taken away by paramedics to go to the hospital, she fully believed Colette was going to be just fine. She'd just spoken to her. She seemed good. But just several hours later, Colette died as a result of her injuries. During their tragic car ride, Colette took this selfie. 8 minutes later, Ashley would attempt to pass the truck. Ashley was charged with reckless driving, but no criminal charges were filed.
Just found out my insurance agent has been ripping me off. I saved $72 a month.
Not the insurance agent. But what? That sucks. That's always the sad.
From the time Garnett Spears was born on December 3rd, 2008, he was a sick child. At just 2 months old, he stopped being able to keep food down and he began losing weight. His mother, Lacey, switched him from breast milk to formula, thinking that might help, but it didn't. So she switched to a combination between breast milk and formula. That didn't work, so she brought him to the doctor. After running a blood test, it was determined Garnett's sodium levels were too high, which was most likely the cause for his upset stomach. And so the doctor gave Garnett an IV, which flushed the sodium out of his system, and immediately Garnett seemed better off. And then afterwards, when Lacey asked the doctor why could this be happening, he said he didn't know, that perhaps it was something in his formula, or maybe even something in her breast milk. He gave her some advice on what she should be eating, and then gave her the obligatory reminder to, don't give him anything besides breast milk or formula. He gave her special formula to use, and then he sent her on her way. Despite following doctor's orders, over the next several months, Garnett continued to get sick, be brought into the doctor's office, only to discover his sodium levels were elevated again. Finally, after 9 months of this still going on and Lacey not getting any answers about what was going on with her son, she brought him to a specialist who suggested, as a short-term solution, why don't we just put a feeding tube directly into Garnett's abdomen? That way we can guarantee he's getting the exact right mix of nutrients, and if he's still having elevated sodium levels after that, then we'll look at other reasons this could be happening. After it was inserted, Garnett's condition seemed to dramatically improve, leading doctors to believe it had to have been some strange ingredient inside the formula or something inside of Lacey's breast milk. But despite his improved condition, Garnett was not 100% healthy. Over the next few years, periodically, his sodium levels would spike, which no doctor could explain, and it would cause stomach pains and headaches, and in some instances, it would cause seizures. And Lacey, who diligently documented every single food, fluid, anything that went inside of her son, at the first sign of trouble, she would rush him to the hospital. But all doctors could ever do was administer an IV to flush the sodium out, and then give her the obligatory reminder to only feed him certain foods that were low in sodium. And so for the next few years, life went on like that. In 2012, when Garnett was 4, they moved out of Lacey's hometown in Alabama to New York. They moved into a retirement community called the Fellowship, which is a place where younger people can go and live for free in exchange for caring for the elderly. And Garnett loved it there. He would run around the halls and poke his head in the older folks' room, and they all loved Garnett. It was really just a happy place for both Lacey and for Garnett. During that time, Lacey started a blog called Garnett the Great, which documented Garnett's life and their kind of collective struggles to figure out what was going on with Garnett with these weird sodium level spikes. The blog gained a lot of support, not only because of Garnett's condition, but because this was not the first hardship the mother and son had had to face. When Lacey was pregnant with Garnett, Garnett's father, who was a police officer, was killed in a car accident. And so the supporters of this blog were really eager to find ways to give back and support this mother and son. But no amount of love and support could have prevented what happened in January of 2014. On the 17th of that month, Garnett woke up with a high fever and stomach pains, and on the drive into the hospital, he had a seizure. When they arrived, doctors tested Garnett's blood, and like usual, his sodium levels were through the roof. And so they administered an IV, which reduced his symptoms. And after he was back to normal, they said they wanted to keep him at the hospital for a couple of days to observe him because of that seizure he had. They wanted to make sure that, 1, it didn't happen again, and 2, there wasn't something else going on. For the first 2 days of Garnett's observation at the hospital, he was asymptomatic. They tested his blood, his sodium levels were normal, and everything seemed to be going fine. And in fact, they were getting ready to discharge him when all of a sudden on January 19th, so 2 days after arriving, he suddenly seemed to be in much worse shape. When they tested his blood, sure enough, his sodium levels were at an all-time high. And so after giving him an IV and attempting to lower his sodium levels, it just wasn't happening quickly enough. And so they transferred him to a specialized children's hospital that could handle this situation better, and they were able to bring his levels back down to normal. However, the damage had been done. This final enormous sodium spike had led to massive brain swelling swelling that ultimately killed him a couple of days later. After his death, doctors were baffled at how his sodium could have spiked on January 19th because they were closely monitoring what was going into his body. And sodium does not just suddenly appear in your body. It needs to be inserted into your body. And so they reviewed all of his medical files, and that included looking at the footage of the camera that had been set up at the foot of the bed facing Garnett to monitor him for seizures. And on that camera, they saw his own mother, Lacey, take him out of bed on the 19th, carrying a white cup and an attachment to Garnett's feeder tube. She takes Garnett out of bed. She walks him into the bathroom. A couple minutes later, she brings him back, puts him back in bed. And seconds later, he's violently ill. They come in, they test his blood, and what do you know? The sodium is at that critical high point that ultimately killed him. Doctors were obviously very suspicious of Lacey and what she was doing with her son in the bathroom. And so they showed it to police. Police launch an investigation. They go to Lacey's house, and as soon as they walk inside, there is table salt all over the house. There's salt on every table, and inside of the boy's room was an IV stand with this brackish-looking liquid inside of an IV bag that they tested, and it was salt water that contained the equivalent of 70 salt packets. Lacey had been intentionally poisoning her son with too much salt since he was born because she liked the attention she received. Lacey had a history of lying to get attention. She used to lie as a kid and even as an adult about different illnesses that she said she had, and she also lied about Garnett's father. He was not a police officer. He had not been killed in an accident. He was just a former friend that she refused to let see Garnett. During Garnett's final hospital stay, after doctors informed Lacey that her son's brain had swollen so much it was unlikely he would survive, all caused by Lacey, she posted this picture to Facebook. Shortly after, Garnett slipped into a coma and never regained consciousness. He was 6 years old. Lacey was sentenced to 20 years.
What is this place? We develop soldiers like yourself.
I don't want to edit today.
To life in prison.
It's too late. I can't edit. It's like, what?
Between 1890 and
I'm
1963, 695 people were executed in the state of New York. 614 of those executions were carried out via electric chair in one of the most infamous maximum security prisons in the world called Sing Sing. Sing Sing has long held an almost mythological place in American culture. Many books have been written about the prison, and many movies have been set there. Among the notorious people who were put to death there was the serial killer David Berkowitz, better known as the Son of Sam, who killed 6 people and injured another 10. The boss of the infamous Brooklyn gang called Murder Inc., which was responsible for over 20 murders, and the so-called Lonely Hearts Killers, which was Martha Beck and Raymond Fernandez, who during the 1940s and 50s used newspaper ads to lure up to 20 lonely women to their death. But today's story is not about a famous condemned inmate, it's about a famous picture of one. In the late 1800s, Arthur Mayhew killed a shopkeeper during a botched robbery. His accomplice turned him in order to receive a lesser sentence for himself. Convicted and condemned, Mayhew found himself awaiting execution for a year inside of the Sing Sing death house. During that time, 3 people were executed. Given the layout of the Sing Sing death house, Mayhew would not have seen these 3 executions, but he would have heard them. Radiating out from the death chamber were 6 cells known as the dance hall. This is where the next 6 people scheduled to die waited their turn. These cells were only separated from the death chamber by a thin wall and a small door, neither of which were soundproof. During executions, white sheets were draped over the 5 cells in the dance hall that still contained occupants. From behind these sheets, prisoners could hear the guards come down the hall, open up the door of that 6th cell of the person who's going to be executed. They could hear them being removed from their cell, walk down the hall. They'd hear the death chamber door open and then shut. They would hear the prisoner's last words, if they had any, and then they would hear the clunk of the switch being thrown and then the hum of electricity as it surged. Many times, the executions did not go smoothly, causing the condemned to yell out in agony and pain as the switch is flipped over and over and over again. And as a final torture, the prisoners in the dance hall would hear the sound of the autopsy being performed. New York state law mandated an autopsy be completed immediately after execution. There were rumors floating around the prison that the electric chair didn't always kill the prisoner, that in fact they were just stunned by the time they got to the autopsy table. One doctor's autopsy report in 1951 said he believed the reason autopsies were done right after the execution was not to determine cause of death. it was to ensure they were dead. Because of their proximity to this macabre process, prisoners in the dance hall oftentimes lost their mind waiting to be executed. On March 12, 1897, Arthur Mayhew's weight was up. He woke up at 7:30 that morning after 5 hours of undisturbed sleep. He was going to be second to die that day. When the guard showed up to bring him breakfast, Mayhew apparently looked nervous and he asked the guard, "What's the weather like outside?" And the guard told him it was raining, to which Mayhew said, "Man, that's too bad." Initially, Mayhew refused food, but then later called the guard back over and asked if he could have eggs and coffee. After breakfast, Mayhew's wife and brother showed up and they visited with him until shortly before 10:30, when unexpectedly, the guy who was supposed to be executed ahead of Mayhew was informed his sentence had been commuted. And so in full view of Mayhew, this guy is crying tears of joy, he's gonna live, and he gets transferred back to general population. And so because that guy's execution was no longer happening, they decided to bump Mayhew's execution up to right then and there. And so they went to his cell, they opened the door, and they told Mayhew's wife and brother it was time for them to leave. As they were walking out, Mayhew was pleading with them to believe him that he was innocent, but neither of them believed him. They knew he was guilty. The guards shut Mayhew's cell and told him he had 45 minutes left. And so while Mayhew kneeled inside of his cell praying loudly, the executioner right across the hall prepped the electric chair. At 11:10 a.m., Mayhew watched the guards as they pinned white sheets in front of the other 5 cells. And then at 11:15, they came to his door, they opened it up, and they said, "It's time." They walked Mayhew over to the death chamber door, they opened it up, and as soon as Mayhew saw the electric chair for the first time, he panicked and he tried to run away, but there was 5 men that grabbed him and pulled him into the death chamber, and as he's screaming for mercy, they dragged him over to the chair, forced him down, and began putting on his restraints. Initially, when Arthur sat down, he was viciously fighting and trying to get the men off of him, but as they were nearing the end of getting all of his restraints on, he suddenly just went limp, and he had this look of complete resignation on his face. He knew it was over. In the barely 60-second long window of time when the final restraint was placed at 11:16 and when he was pronounced dead at 11:17, a photographer walked out in front of Arthur Mayhew and took this picture. Mayhew's final words were, "Jesus, have mercy on," and his words were cut off by the death-dealing electrical current. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments.
Well, alrighty then. That's a lot. Jeez, that's messed up. Yeah, no, I'm glad we don't do the electric chair anymore, because that was one messed up way of dying. Not gonna lie. Anyways. Stay strong, everyone. Stay safe. Wear your seatbelt, wear your helmet, wear your mask. Don't point the flashlight behind you. Don't look in the haunted mirrors. And as always, have a nice day.